Hello, everyone. Welcome to IFFT's Webinar Wednesday. I'm June Rawl, the director for IFFT. Today's webinar is titled Incorporating Mathematics into ESL Instruction. Today, we're going to focus our attention on ESL mathematics and critical thinking competencies. You might be thinking, math and ESL? And I have a question. What would this be challenging for you to integrate these competencies into your daily instruction? And how would it be done? Or maybe you're already doing all this. Well, today we have Ron Cruz facilitating our webinar. He will share some simple strategies with you today that we hope will address some of these questions. We also have Phil Anderson from the Florida Department of Education on hand to address any questions that you might have. We want to hear from you. Ask your questions. Tell us what you think. We'll be monitoring your interactions throughout the webinar and we'll address them as they come up. You do this by using the Q&A tab that you see on your screen. Now, for a couple of things that you probably already know, but just in case we have some new participants today, I wanted to remind you that your attendee microphones are muted. Today's webinar, like all IFFT webinars, are recorded and they are archived on the IFFT website. Give us about 48 hours for this webinar to pop up. If you haven't already downloaded the PowerPoint and the handbook, keep in mind they're already loaded on the IFFT website under the ESL section. Ron will be bringing your attention to this workbook as we go along. If you're watching the webinar with a group, please send me the names of the participants so we can reflect it in their portal accounts. So that's all I have. I'm going to turn the webinar over to Ron now, who's going to introduce to you the objectives for today.
Thank you so much, June. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending precious moment within your day to participate and learn a little bit about incorporating mathematics into ESOL instruction. Again, my name is Ron Cruz. I know we've got some regulars online right now, and I wanted to just simply talk about the agenda for today. So we're going to start off with why do we have to teach mathematics where we're ESOL teachers, and so it's really not our agenda or forte to teach that. So we're going to address that right off the bat to kind of give you like the background of why we're having to do this and why we're incorporating mathematics. And maybe you might already realize that you're already doing and you're already teaching mathematics as we go along. So please do that by affirming through the Q&A tab and let us know, hey, yeah, I'm already doing this and things like that. We're going to talk about the math that you already do in your ESL classrooms. We're going to talk about how you can seamlessly blend math in your language instruction and also incorporate critical thinking skills into the instruction, because as you know, it's already incorporated in our Adult ESOL curriculum framework. Last but not the least, we're going to go over all of the wonderful resources that we put together for you relating to this webinar and other things ESL. So please stay tuned for that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So why do you think mathematics is important? So I'm going to try to gather some responses from the participants. Why do you think it's important, even at the ESL levels, to teach the mathematics? So I'm going to move on, but I'm going to wait for some of your responses. And I'm going to go back and circle through some of your responses as we go along. But one of the things that I really want to emphasize here is that mathematics is part of what we have to teach because of the College and Career Readiness Standards. The College and Career Readiness Standards was published in 2013, and according to these standards, all adult learners need to meet real-world demands. Well, real world, we deal with real world I mean, we deal with mathematics in the real world, whether we're buying stuff or we're looking, whether it's face to face using, money, or maybe buying something electronically. We count things, we measure things in all of the trades. So we really want to make sure that those mathematics skills are being incorporated as early as the ESL, because it's really part of the standards. Also, in addition to mathematics skills, they're going to also require critical thinking skills in the workplace. And how do we promote those critical thinking skills? One of the best ways to do that is really in the context of mathematics. If we teach them a little bit of problem solving here and there, that will also promote the skills of problem solving in other aspects or in other forms, or maybe problems in the real world. Potential for advancement in the workplace hinges on being able to perform complex tasks. So that's really the bottom line, is that the workplace today is really moved by technology and moved by innovation. So they expect the workforce to be able to perform complex tasks, incorporating mathematics and communication skills in order to perform their daily duties or work. Also, as you already know, you're very familiar with the English language proficiency standards. That was, part of this big initiative, which is called WIOA, which is the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act. This requires the states to align adult education state-adopted standards to a more challenging level, focusing on reading, writing, speaking, and comprehension in English, which is what we do in the ESL classroom, and couple that with mathematics skills. So really, you will see that in the ELP standards, if you incorporate mathematics skills, you're automatically going to address that need for rigor and equity and access for all of our learners that are in the ESL classroom, and really appropriately preparing them for post-secondary education and the workplace. So this is another document that you're also familiar with. As you may already know, we have the Adult ESOL Curriculum Framework. The Adult ESOL Curriculum Framework has three components. It has the College and Career Readiness Standards, it has the English Language Proficiency Standards, and it has the Life and Work Competencies. So let's focus a little bit more on the Life and Work Competencies. So from the Adult ESOL Curriculum Framework, the Life and Work Competencies are divided into 9 different areas. Specifically communication, employment, community, consumer economics, health, civics, environment, mathematics, learning, and thinking, which is another thing that we call critical thinking. So under mathematics, these are some of the things that were mentioned there. And we may be working with a differently formatted version of the competencies, but I just kind of blew it up for you on the version that I'm using. But I'm sure you're already familiar with these mathematics competencies. So the good thing is you're already doing the math. So for some of you, you actually are actually doing a little bit more math than expected, because a lot of you who expect a lot more from your students, kind of like it segues into this discussion, and then the next thing you know, you're finding yourself like, okay, let's put together a budget, or okay, yeah, you're just filling out a checkbook, but what about if we're paying by check, let's say at a supermarket or whatnot? So look at that context in the real world, and then becomes more of a realistic world problem or real world problem solving activity for you in class. So what I'm going to segue into is kind of like refreshing on some of the things that we already do as an ESL teacher. So yes, numbers and counting is one of our fundamental mathematics skills, and we actually start teaching this at the ESOL level, even at the literacy level, teaching the students how to write the number 1, writing numbers, and then teaching them how to count, because counting the numbers counting objects is really one very critical skill that students learn at the early stages. So why do we teach students how to count, read, write numbers at the literacy and foundation? Why is that important at that level? So I would like to solicit some responses from you. So please use the Q&A tab. Type in your reason. Why do you think this is important at the literacy and foundations level? At the early stages, why do we have to teach numeric symbols, words of numbers, and just literally teaching them how to count? So I'm going to be waiting for your responses, but I'm going to continue moving on and then circle back to your responses as we move along. So according to our mathematics competencies that are listed in the Adult ESOL curriculum frameworks, we must be able to teach our students how to count at least up to 100, okay, counting by ones, or even skip counting by tens. So skip counting is a little bit more high level or higher level skill, and you can't really teach them how to skip count by 10 unless they really know how to count by one. So this is done in stages, and it's done very diligently and systematically in some of the ESOL, foundations level and literacy level classes that I've been to. And then also classify and identify numeric symbols. So if you show a 9 or the number 9, then the students must be able to reiterate that they're looking at the number 9, or call out the word for the numbers that I'm showing out. Or we could be comparing objects. So it could be like, okay, I'm showing you, hey, this is 3 apples on this side, but I have 5 oranges on the other side. So students have a real life connection to that, a hands-on connection to what we're saying as numbers. So if we actually do that and use actual physical objects and use hands-on learning when we're teaching numbers and counting, it's more likely that students are going to be able to remember the English words for numbers and for counting. Okay, so let me check just the Q&A tab, see if we have any responses here. Okay, I don't see anything. All right, so moving on.
Ron, there's some responses here in the chat as well.
Okay.
Do you want me to read them off?
Yeah, for some reason, June, my Q&A tab is blank, so I don't know what's going on.
Some of the responses, Ron, is they're saying to survive in the real world, they must be able to count money, tell time, give addresses, phone numbers.
Yes, and all of those, June, are correct. All of those things that you just mentioned, they all contain numbers, whether they are listed in a numeric symbol or whether they're listed as words. So really, really important. Do we have any more, June?
Yes, there's a couple more, Ron, because it's a basic skill taught in every language. One of the first skills I practiced when learning French and Spanish was the sounds of the alphabet, and 2, the sounds for the words for the numbers. It's a basic everyday skill.
Very good. That is really important. Thank you very much for sharing that. So again, a lot of your students, especially if they are from, Latin countries or Spanish-speaking countries, they're already familiar with the numeric symbols. So they just need to match the numeric symbols to the English words. So maybe 1 is uno or 2 is dos. So those are the things that makes it easier, but the number itself is the same. Now, unless you are from, let's say, China or Japan, where there's a different way where you write numbers, most of our students in the ESL classroom are going to recognize numeric symbols. So really, half the job's already done for us. We just have to just reiterate and connect them with the English word and the spelling of the English words for each, representing each number. So moving on, so we also teach at the beginning levels of ESL the 2 ways where we can write numbers. We can write numbers as cardinal numbers, or we can write them in ordinal numbers. But one way that we make the differentiation between the 2 is cardinal numbers is really used for counting or denoting a number, whereas ordinal numbers we're really looking at the ordering of these things. So, so it's really, really important to show the real world application of cardinal and ordinal numbers. So as I said here, it's listed on your screens. Ordinal numbers are mostly used when we're writing dates, when we're ranking. We usually rank our students who finished first, who finished second, okay, or who did the second best or third best. So those are the things, when we practice those descriptors with the students, we are using automatically ordinal numbers. Or if we're giving instructions, so for it, very, very important that it's, our students will not be able to perform tasks if we're not able to list instructions in order. So therefore, like say, for example, I'd like for you first to write your name on your paper. Second, I'd like for you to write your ad. So already using ordinal numbers just when communicating instructions with your students. When we're talking about floors or locations of things, we are looking at like, well, it's the third street down. So like something like that, or you're at the third floor. Things like that is very, very important when you're teaching language skills to the students. And again, these are the mathematics competencies that we are addressing when we teach cardinal and ordinal numbers. Well, ESL would not be complete, just like what June mentioned from one of your comments, if we don't write dates. Time is very important to us. Time is very important to everyone. Time is gold, as they may say, or as everybody says. So we're always interested of when something's happening, when something is due, somebody's birthday, Christmas, special events. These are all denoted by dates. Also expiration dates. So we see dates everywhere in the English language. In here, this is just showing the different ways that you can format or write dates and things like that, so that we teach our students. Some countries write this in a different order. So please be mindful. What I'm showing you is the American system of formatting for dates. And again, this is part of our mathematics competency, which says tell and write time in different formats. So this one is the one that's doing in time. I'd like for you to pay attention because there's something wrong with this slide. There's a missing dot. It's supposed to be 6:05. So it's not a dot, but it's on a digital clock. I guess when they took the snapshot of these, it kind of missed out on the second dot, but it is a colon after the first one or two digits of the time. But again, we're showing them the military time denotation, and also the 12-hour denotation, or the 24-hour time, or the AM PM time. So that's also very important. Again, part of our mathematics competency. One of the things that I really also kind of see or realize is that a lot of things are now written in digital format. And when I show my students like an actual clock with hands, they're having difficulty understanding or counting elapsed time. So it's very, very important for us to not just show the digital or how it's written in digits, but it's also good to show side by side with the student how it looks like on a clock with hands. Especially if you're going to the Big Ben in Europe, you're going to see that clock. You won't be able to read that if you only know how to read digital time. Okay, money. Money is so much important for our students. Actually, a lot of the math teachers, if students are having a difficult time understanding a concept, teachers always put it in terms of money. And that's also the same thing for our students. At our literacy level, we teach our students money. A lot of us, especially in our program where we have mostly refugees, they don't recognize American money. Or dollars. So what we do is we introduce these play money with the class. Sometimes I would randomly give my students, a bunch of coins and bills, and then I'd like for them to kind of write out, in numeric or in words, the amount that they have. So it's really, really good to activity to practice the English. It's very, very important, especially for refugees. I've got one student sharing with me. She went to the local grocery and gave the cashier $100 and did not expect anything in change because she didn't know that she was giving them something that's worth $100. So she has no concept of amount, and she's not very familiar with money. So we had to rein that student in and kind of really do a lot of lessons on getting familiar with money. But again, when we're talking money and we're teaching money with our students, we are addressing the mathematics competencies that are posted on your screens right now. Counting, identifying numeric symbols, which you can see in the money that there are numeric symbols there. Reading and writing, because that's also very important in both numeric form or in expanded form or in word form. Decimal notation. So yes, if you have coins, you've got pennies, you've got nickels and dimes, then you get into the decimal notation. So teaching the students, you're already doing this. So you're already teaching decimal numbers to your students when you teach them money. And then also compare objects with measurable attributes. So sometimes I would bunch up a whole bunch of money and coins, give one to one student, and then another randomly bunch up money and coins to another student, and ask them, okay, which of you had the greater amount, or which of you has a greater buying power? And they're always very competitive when we do something like that. And also, of course, this is a timed activity when we do it in class so that we practice that mathematical fluency as well. So moving on, if we have money, then we can shop. Well, Florida is very, very popular destination to spend money because people go here, and we've got a lot of tourists in Florida. We've got a lot of amusement parks. Florida is very well known for hospitality and tourism, and also shopping. We've got a lot of outlet stores everywhere. And I know, June, there's one in your area at Vero Beach. So our students love shopping. They love spending money. But what we also wanted to teach our student is to spend money wisely. And one way to spend money wisely is to shop when there's big sales. So we teach those students things like that, the terminology in buying, not just the communication skills as you walk up the counter or ask for a size of a shoe. We're teaching those. But as we are teaching those, let's also incorporate some, okay, what if it's 50% off? Or what if the cashier said, we have a special going on and all lady shirts are half off. So the salesperson is talking in terms of fractions, but really it kind of represents a percent off of something that they're buying. So we're really teaching all of these things already when we talk about. It's always fun when we do shopping lessons in class, places in the community. When we go over the unit on places in the community, we always talk about the mall because the mall is one of the most popular places in the community. So we talk about that, and when we get into that, I automatically segue into a little bit of math, talking about sales and discounts, and even taxes. Sometimes we have to explain to our students what really, and students find this very, very fascinating because in other countries, tax is already included in the price tag that's posted when you go around and shop. But in the United States, because the tax rates are very different from place to place, city to city, county to county, state to state, we really don't do that. So I have to remind my students, especially the ones that are new to the United States, that, hey, wait a minute, you need to know that you are going to pay sales tax. And in Tampa in particular, we pay about 8.5% tax here because we just approved kind of like a referendum to support schools here. But I always tell them you have to add on if you want to estimate it, give it about a 10%, add a 10% more to what is already printed on the label, so that you don't end up at the counter with insufficient amount of money to pay for what you bought, and then you end up returning some items because you didn't have enough money for them. So always remember, and we always talk about this in the ESL class, and that's always a fun. One other thing that I do want to mention is that CASAS also has these what we call reading task areas. So you're very familiar with this if you're an ESL teacher. And one of the things that we want our students to be able to read are signs, price tags, ads, product labels. And that's all during I teach that all within when we talk about financial literacy, or when we talk about places in the community, or we talk about money and shopping. And so I always incorporate these CASAS reading task skills into the conversation. So my students are already, when they see a price tag, they automatically know what it means, or they can answer and solve questions. So how many of you practice writing checks with your students? So every textbook I've seen has a unit has a section that allows our students to practice how to fill out a check. Some even go further and shows the student how to balance the checkbooks. Really, we're already doing this, and this is a really good practice for our ESL students, writing numbers in words and writing numbers in numeric form. So understanding the difference between the two and filling out and appropriately filling out. But look at this, parts 1, part 3, part 4, and sometimes part 6 has all numeric symbols or words that students already know. So immediately, we're already applying what we've learned in the literacy and foundations level. And again, when we do activities with a checkbook, these are the mathematics competencies that we're addressing: counting, classifying numbers, and also importantly is decimal notation. We also have, it's very important because there's also, do you notice where the fraction notation is here in the check? So if you do notice it, go to your Q&A tab and go ahead and type which section of the check do you see the fraction notation. I'll give you a moment. And June, when you see a response, let me know. So you're just going to type in the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 to let me know which section of the checkbook do you see a fraction notation.
In the dollars, in section 4.
In section $4. Very good. Thank you, June. All right. So we're moving on. When we, after teaching money, after teaching check and things like that, it's also important to teach students how to measure. Measurement is a very, very basic skill. Measurement is used in all trades where we're trying to feed our students into career, technical, or post-secondary vocational education, or for part-time continuing learning education. Measurement plays a tremendous amount of work and unit in these fields of study. Measurement vocabulary is essential not only in the daily routines, because when you buy something from the grocery store, do you buy something in pint or cup, or when you're cooking, or when you're trying to repair something in your home, or you're trying to replace something? Measurement is so important. So when we teach measurement, the words for measurement, the units of measurement, we teach them the words yards, inches, tablespoon, cup, all of these different measurements of length, of mass, of volume, or weight. So all of these are so important when we teach that. So in what unit of study, or in what unit or theme of the ESL the ESL instruction, do you usually insert measurement in? So I'd like to know what you guys think, or what you already are doing, or when is the perfect time to insert measurement. So June, let me know if we've got a response, okay?
Okay.
So I'm just going to move on.
Low beginning. Some are
Okay.
saying low beginning.
Awesome. Do you always use, when one of the things that the ESL students love is they love to cook, and they love to bring food, and they love parties. So to make that and add a little bit more rigor into that activity, when we do little celebrations and showcase our traditions and cultures through food, is I always ask them questions, measurement questions. So I ask them, so how much sugar do you put in this delicious dessert? How many servings do you make? Do you if I have a gallon of milk, will I be able to feed the entire class if I wanted to make this flan? Or how far does it take to get from your home to school if you're walking? So things like that. Those are the types of conversation I have with my students when I'm trying to promote measurement vocabulary with them. And again, CASA's reading task areas, students need to be able to look at the CASA's task reading number 5. Students must be able to read measurement scales. So it's good to have like a scale in the classroom. I have one because I monitor my weight and monitor my eating, but we always use that in class, so I'll just bring the one that I have, the bathroom scale I have, I'll bring it to school, and it's like, okay, so could somebody come up to the scale and let's measure your weight, or if you can pronounce your weight or read your weight or read the scales. Sometimes we would have like a small balance in the classroom, and trying to actually measure things. Makes a whole lot of difference, and it sticks. As you may already know, most of your students are used to the SI, or System International Measurement, or what we call metric system. America is one of the few places which is using the English customary system, where we have ounces and pints and inches and yards, but the rest of the world is using millimeter, centimeter, meter, kilometer. So these, what other countries have found out, these are easily memorized by people. They're good because they're always multiples of 10. So converting from one unit to another is very quick and very straightforward. Whereas in the English system, or the customary unit system, there's really weird conversions between units of measure. I have here a measurement conversion table that I found online that may be useful to you. You can print it out and use it as a guide for your students. We don't expect ESL students to be able to convert, but we want our students to be able to estimate something. So they need to know somewhat of a conversion. So if we're saying, okay, well, my house is 5 kilometers from school, so how far is that in miles? So just kind of like giving an idea of the difference between how far a mile is and how far a kilometer is, to allow that student to apply a little bit of critical thinking to kind of guesstimate the how far it is. But a lot of the conversions are actually done at the ABE level. But I find it very difficult when I'm always communicating with my ESL students, because they're always only used to the metric system. So I don't know how you guys approach this type of instruction with your class. So I'd love to hear some of your feedback and some of your success stories on incorporating the conversion here without really getting into the mathematics of it all. So if you've got some good ideas or something that works with your class, type it in your Q&A tab. And June, if you see something, just jump right in, let me know, and then we'll move on, okay?
Okay, Ron, we do have a comment that is saying, my students will share recipes at our food get-togethers. I will print them out for them. Anytime you can make the learning pertinent, it's a win-win.
Oh, yes, definitely. They love bragging about their food. They love bragging about their recipe. And they're always like, I make the best pineapple chicken, or oh, I make the best fried rice, things like that. Really, really cool. It's real world. It's very relevant to the student, and they're excited and motivated to talk about it. Do we have any more? June, do we have
No,
any
that's
more?
it. That's it
Okay.
for now.
All right. So jump in when you see any more good ideas. Okay. I'm going to move on.
Okay, will do.
Okay, so using a lot of visuals is very, very important. So getting students used to the customary or the English system is very, very difficult because, again, just like I said, they don't come in multiples of 10. They don't convert in multiples of 10. So therefore, this is one little visual that I found online that you might find useful. 1 gallon, 1 quart, 1 pint. So you see what's inside the 1 gallon. I usually just print this out larger and then post it in my classroom. So my students get used to the conversion between cups and gallons and quarts and pints, whereas in most countries they would use milliliters. Now, with cooking, however, with cooking and recipe, a lot of the cookbooks that I've seen, they don't really use millimeters and milligrams and things like that. In cooking, that's an exceptional field that has stuck with the customary measures. So because a lot of the measuring tools and measuring instruments are in English units. So that's a little bit of an info there for you. And again, teaching them, they love cooking. Again, this reiterates what you just mentioned, June, that teacher that just mentioned about sharing recipes. Always fun to do in an ESL class. Remember, guys, food, the best way to my students' minds is through their stomach. Okay, so when I teach, fractions, that's a very complicated topic. Again, just like I said, through the stomach, I teach fractions with food all the time. So pizza, Italian, American, blendish type, whatever they like. But if you say pizza, they would know what you're talking about. This is a very international food, as I may say. But, if you as we slice up the pizza before I give them out to the students when we're having little pizza parties, I always have them do a little quiz on, okay, so before I slice the pizza or after I've given so many pizza, how much do I have left? Or give me a fraction that represents what's already been given out, or give me a fraction that represents what's left in the tray. So we're talking about that. We're writing it in fractions. Students are getting used to, again, numeric symbols and this particular type of number. And again, using the decimal notation, especially for fractions, is part of our mathematics competencies. Now, it's also important to teach fractions without food. So once your students are already familiar with fractions through food, you also need to show them how fractions would look like without it. So that's really very important to do in class because, again, on standardized tests, such as the TABE 11 and 12 or the GED, fractions are not always represented in food. So if we only use food to show fractions, then we're setting our students up for failure for these standardized tests. The weather. So who doesn't, we always talk about this in class. Best way to start a conversation, talk about something that is common or something that is a good conversation starter is always the weather. People always have something to say about the weather, and I'm sure your students always has something to say about the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's rainy, or it's gonna rain soon. Can we leave early? Things like that is it's very common conversation. But have we done our part as teachers in introducing mathematics when we have those types of conversations or those types of lessons to you. So when you're already talking about weather, sunny day, cloudy day, Monday, Tuesday, when you're already talking about days of the week, describing the weather, talking about adjectives like hot and cold, you wanted to already incorporate measurement of temperature, okay? Or even sometimes measurement of humidity. And in Florida, of course, humidity, something that we always want to talk about within our class. And also pollen. I'm very allergic to pollen, so I always watch the news and watch out what the pollen count is for the day. So if I have to overdose myself on allergy meds before going to work, so I won't be sneezing my way to work. So again, when you're talking about measurements and weather, please incorporate, show them how to read a temperature scale, or a thermometer, because again, in one of our reading task areas is, students must be able to read these things. And one thing that students are very familiar with is the thermostat in the room. And I'm sure, I don't know about you, but some in our class, our thermostat is off limits to the students. It's only the teacher that can touch the thermostat, because sometimes the students would overheat the room or freeze everybody to death. So sometimes I try to get the feel. But again, taking the students close to the thermostat, reading the temperature scales, reading the numbers there, reading the different settings. Again, you're already practicing mathematics when you do that. All right, so we're going to do a quick pause. Go ahead, June.
Oh, good segue. Back to the check writing again. One way to connect decimals, fractions, and money is to teach check writing and utilizing something like $12.50 over 100 in the numeric section.
Yes, very good. Great idea, June. Thank you. Do we have any more?
And then there's some people that are writing about the use of manipulatives in the classroom.
Yes, manipulatives is very, very important, June. So I'm going to pause right here. And before we do this activity, I want to point out our workbook. So you see all of these visuals that I have for you. It's like, oh, I like that, or I want to use that, or well, we have it all put together for you. So in your, when you log in and you, in the webinar page of IFFT Day, where you downloaded the materials and the PowerPoint slides, you can also download the workbook that goes along with this webinar. Again, we use this workbook to really allow the teachers, especially the ones that are reading or are participating in the webinar after the webinar has concluded, or they're watching the webinar at the recorded one, they're able to kind of dive in and feel like they're still participating through the workbook. So the workbook's got all your table contents. We did provide some guiding questions here again for you. So maybe as we go along, take a look at these guiding questions. If you're viewing this at a later time or you're viewing the recorded version, it is best to read the guiding questions first before diving into the webinar, so that you can already activate your prior knowledge before even starting the webinar or before viewing the webinar. But all of the visuals that I have incorporated into the PowerPoint are in here. I even gave you a little kind of like worksheet here on writing checks and things like that. So all of the visual there, we've got some questions in there, and then we're going into this activity. So a lot of these you can easily cut and paste or snip it into your own and make your own worksheet or whatnot. But this is the activity I'm referring to, is the activity on teaching math with a medicine label. So it's on page 11 of the workbook, but for your convenience, I am posting them here in front of you right now. So let's do a quick popcorn here, June, so please pay attention. Look at our Q&A tab that I'm not seeing. I've apologized for that. But the question here is, can you give me all of the math topics you can teach with this material? And this is a medicine label. So we're waiting for math topics, math skills that you can teach your students when you're, teaching them a medicine label. As you already know, medicine label is part of our reading task areas. So students must be able to be familiar on how to read medicine label. And not only that, when they go to the doctor and they get their prescription, and when they're sick and when they're buying medication, every medication has its own label, and they need to know what it is. So otherwise they'll overdose themselves or not take enough to make them feel better. So what do we have here, June? Do we have any responses yet?
We do. That's an excellent example of of reading a medicine label and the amount of medicine, especially if it's in its liquid form. They have to make sure to protect their child that they give the correct dosage.
Oh my God, whoever is saying that, you are kind of completely reading my mind right now. This is something that really, really is important, that
There's
we
a
label.
couple more too.
Okay, go ahead.
How about how many pills come in a bottle?
Oh, yes. So you can do counting, okay, and how many milligrams per pill. So you can do a little bit of ratios there just to prepare the students. Good.
Numbers, amount, quantity, measurement, all this is a good activity within this exercise.
Awesome. Very good. So pointing out the different parts of the medicine label, sometimes even the barcode, but that's really going over the top. But really knowing
how many do you have to take each day? Is the dose, if the dose, oh my gosh, is
dosage.
two capsules twice a day. How many capsules would you have to take each day? Multiplication skills, expiration dates. There's a lot of the timing of this medicine. Is it do you take it in the morning, in the evening? Is it 24 hours?
Right. Is it every 8 hours? Is it every 4 hours? Or is it more loosely connected, like every after meals? A lot of important information. Good. So this is really a good material. So just so you know, this is in your workbook. So you can really enlarge this, make copies, pass this out to your students, and do some of these activities already in class. Maybe even match a doctor's prescription, the one that is nicely written, because a lot of doctors, I can't barely read my doctor's handwriting, but now he had gotten into a point of using an iPad and printing the prescriptions for me, so I don't have to go through the hassle of trying to really decipher his handwriting. But pretty much really good activity, lots of math. You can even go into higher level thinking. You can go into problem solving, just like what June said. You're like, how much medicine would have you taken after a week if you're taking one pill a day at 100 milligrams per day? So lots of good activities, very straightforward. And I'm sure your ESL students are more than capable to solve these little basic problems for them, because this is kind of like it, and I'm saying it's literally a matter of life and death. All right, so we're moving on to the next slide. If you want more resources or something that is more on the literature side, there is a book out there by Washington Irving. It's called The Devil and Tom Walker. It's a really good book that integrates math and language arts all together in more a literary piece. Less informational, but more of actually leisurely type reading. So if you're using this material, you're already teaching hitting two birds with one stone. All right, and so when we're talking about informational text, because that's informational text or complex academic text, is really one thing that's completely reiterated in our Adult ESOL curriculum framework, that we introduce and do a lot and really bombard our students with informational text. One thing that I wanted to add here in your piece of knowledge here is that there are common structures for informational text that that students will encounter, sometimes in standardized tests or mostly in the real world. But some informational tasks come in the form of just description. It's just telling them about something. And I usually use symbols or visuals for my lower level students so they can kind of understand what it is. Sometimes an informational text would explain an order of sequencing of things, events or procedure or things that happen in time or history. That's another type of informational text. Some informational texts tend to compare and contrast things, how things are different and how things are the same, we can talk about many things. We can talk about sports, people that like football versus basketball or soccer versus football. You would see most of your students would love, when you say football, they mean soccer. So now we tell them, okay, well, this is what we call football, the American football. And then so now you do a compare and, contrasting of the two. So that's an example of a compare contrast of informational text when they do that. Cause and effect, sometimes we usually encounter this in a lot of science and history type text where one led into something or what happened before and what happened after, or the before and after things. That's a type of structure of informational text. And also problem and solution. So sometimes informational text will give you problems and solutions, such as maybe information about the Great Recession, how we got out of the Great Recession, or are we still in it, And then we talk about a lot of problem and solution in a lot of mathematical text. So informational text, just so you know, comes in many forms. Why am I giving you this piece of information? If the students know the structure of an informational text, they would be able to better interact with that text more, meaning if they know what the text, they'll be able to understand the purpose of the text and also be able to interact with the text, eventually answering those questions revolving around those comprehension questions revolving around informational text. So just a little bit of that. So let's do a little bit of practice here. This is also in your workbook that I provided. So if this is too small for you, you can pull up the copy of the workbook. But I don't want you to read, but I just want you to skim through this and what you're seeing here. So as you can see here in this example, you see some math in here. Let me know, point it out. Use your Q&A tab. Point out to me the mathematics that you see. And then if this is a type of informational text that you are, let's say, using in class, talk about the structure. Is this a compare and contrast type of informational text? Or is it just an informational text that the purpose is to describe something? And then as you talk about the structure, segue into a little bit of a math, and segue into a little bit of problem solving, and then talk about text structures, talk about parts of speech, talk about all of those grammar that we all love to talk about in ESL. So that's there for you if you want to use this with your students. One thing is, like, sometimes it would be hard for an ESL teacher to look for informational text that automatically has some mathematics on it. So I'm giving you one material already that you can start using, while you're still searching for other. Because I don't know about you, I'm having to spend a little bit more time searching for informational text with a lot of math or with some math at all. So I'm giving this piece of informational text for you so that you can use it in your class already and start applying the activities. And last,
Ron, in that activity, there's some feedback that's coming out how you can look at the weight and length, measurement, time, years.
Very good. So you've got time, you've got measurements, you've got measurement of length, measurements of weight. Very good. Thank you very much for sharing those responses. So last but not the least is how can we promote critical thinking in the mathematics classroom? Promote critical thinking. When you say critical thinking, you're either doing one of these things. You're either reasoning, you're evaluating the value of something, or you're solving a problem. So when you're doing that and when you promote critical thinking, introduce lots of data and graphs and charts with your students. Anyway, that's part of our reading CASAS test, CASAS reading task areas. So, start looking at that and do your own little survey with your class. So what's your favorite color, or what's your favorite food, or what's your favorite country to visit, or a favorite state you want to be in the United States. Do a little survey and put it in a graph or a bar graph, and then start using the mathematics right away. A lot of the things that students are going to encounter in the real world are statistical data that are in various formats, such as pie charts, line graphs, and bar graphs. So already start teaching how to read not just text, but also how to read representations like this, because they are part of our CASAS reading goals. Talk about the 4 basic operations when you're talking about money, when you're talking about writing checks, or when talking about discounts and taxes. When you get into those discussions, already start giving them some problems that apply the 4 basic operations. Focus on the vocabulary of math. Vocabulary is central to ESL instruction. So what we're doing, and I'm asking you to do, is just add a little bit more to the vocabulary. You probably already are using this, but teaching them the word sum. That's a strictly math terminology, but plus it's not necessarily just mathematical. So what are the translations of these mathematical terms into other words so that the students will be able to understand the words better? So this chart may be useful to you when you're teaching math vocabulary to your students. That is part of the items that I added into your workbook. This one, you might like this one. This is more visual and more graphic organizer type. But these are like some of the types of questions, like, okay, I give my students, when we already teach and talk about problem solving, I ask them to look for like keywords or key questions that lead into. So for example, if they see the recognized the question, like, what is the perimeter? Well, that has something to do with addition. Or if it's asking how much is the change, there's going to be some subtraction operation there. So this chart that I'm showing you right now has really helped a lot of my ESL students already apply the basic operations and do little basic problem solving in class. All right, so last but not the least are the IFFT resources. I want to go over this a little bit for you. As you already know, we have the ESL toolkit that has a lot. I could just mention, I couldn't mention it enough, that a lot of materials for you. And as you can see on the ESL toolkit, if you're going into the excuse me, ESL tab, is that there is a math section there, and you can look into some mathematical activities that can be done at the ESL level. Of course, we also have the CASAS training, e-module training. When you log into your portal, you can go in and do that CASAS certification online course. If you want to learn more about the college and career readiness standards, which is really what I'm talking about, there are 3 modules that we created for ELA, English Language Arts, but we have 1 module for mathematics that you can take and really learn a little bit more about the college and career readiness standards, more than what I can cover in this webinar. So please check out, go to the IFFT website, turn your colleagues into the recording of this webinar and give them a copy, or show them how to download the workbook so they can follow along using the workbook, because we've done and devoted lots of time and resources developing this stuff for you. So with that said, I am going to open it up for some questions. Do we have any lingering questions, June, that we have not addressed?
Just the handbook, which you addressed, and I'll just reiterate, just go to the ESL section on the IFFT website, and then just go to webinars, and you'll see the handbook there and the PowerPoint. We also put the URL link there in the chat for everyone. So with
Perfect.
that, I'm gonna, there's the feedback questions that are now appearing on your screen. So just take a minute and answer these 3 questions. Your feedback is really valuable to us. So we'd like to know how you enjoyed this webinar. So we're just gonna take a minute, let you do that, and then I'll just have a few closing remarks. Okay, well, thank you so much, Ron, for this great webinar, and thank you for all the participants today. I hope you'll join us on our next webinar, which is scheduled for April 24th. So this webinar is going to be focusing on using the 2019 ESL Florida Department of Education curriculum frameworks in classroom instruction. So you won't want to miss this. It's a 2-part training, so you can go ahead and register for it now. So with that, I want to thank you again, Ron, and thank all the participants for participating today. We really applaud your work, and we are so grateful for all that you do. Thank you for joining us.